Okay, everyone, welcome to Session 8 Leadership class. This chapter is going to talk about power and influence. So let's go ahead and start the class. Before that, is there any questions, any comments from the previous session? Okay. So no questions. Let's go ahead and start. So our learning objectives this session is to understand how position and personal attributes can be a source of power for leaders, and understand the process by which power is acquired or lost in organizations, understand the consequences of power for leadership effectiveness. Okay. So, and also understand some of the psychological processes that explain how leaders influence people, and understand the different types of influence tactics used in organizations, understand how proactive tactics are typically used in influence attempts with subordinates, peers, and superiors. And finally, understand the relative effectiveness of different proactive tactics. Okay. First of all, the conceptions of power and influence. Power is basically capacity of one party to influence another party. The reason we are focusing on power in this session is, as you probably know, for a leader or a manager or somebody who wants to lead a group, you need to have a power. You need to have a source of power, and your peers or your subordinates or your employees have to feel that power, that you are able to lead them, because without that you are not able to lead the way. You need to have the power that it takes for you to show them the way and how to perform. Then authority is the rights or prerogatives, obligations, and duties associated with particular positions in an organization or social system. So as you know, authority, when you have power mostly gives you authority, or sometimes you have the power but you don't have the authority. Authority is the permission or obligation or duty to do certain things. So these two together will make the influence, but just having one is not necessarily enough, but it's necessary. So you need to have the power, but just having the power is not enough, because you need to have the permission to use that power. So authority is something that completes the package for you to be able to lead. What are the outcomes of influence attempts? So first of all, you need to have commitment. So the commitment is basically the target person internally agrees with the decision or request and makes a great effort to carry out the request. So as you all know, we might have power, we might have authority, but what it really takes is the commitment. We need to make that internal promise in our mind that we commit to do certain things, or we commit to use our power within our authority to lead, or to take action or whatever. So basically, the target person should agree with an internal decision that they're gonna make a great effort to carry out what is requested of them. Then compliance. Compliance is the target person is willing to do what the agent asks, but is apathetic rather than enthusiastic about it, and will make only a minimal effort. So basically what it is you need to have compliance also. So especially those who will follow you need to have compliance, and you as well as a leader need to have compliance. Compliance is basically you just try to comply, you try to understand the situation and not necessarily emotional. So when we say apathetic, is basically saying that you need to make sure you're not emotional, or it's not your feeling that is uh, forcing you or leading you in your actions. So you you are enthusiastic about what you do, you're excited, but it doesn't mean that you're emotional. So your emotions are not necessarily leading you, but what it is leading you is your understanding of the situation and all that. And finally, resistance. The target person is opposed to the proposal or request and actively tries to avoid carrying it out. So you need to have a certain level of resistance also. So you got to resist about certain things. You got to stick to certain routines and rules and regulations, and that's what it is when it comes to resistance. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, we are good. Let's go to the next slide. So what are the types of resistance when we talk about it? So refuse to carry out the request. Sometimes you need to refuse to carry out certain requests. When you're a leader, you got to be able to say no sometimes. So leadership is not just saying yes to every single request. You got to be able to manage what requests you could grant, what you can't, what you should say, okay, let's think about it and put it on hold and all that. So basically, sometimes you got to say no, and a lot of times you got to say no, because when you're a leader, when you have the authority and the power, people are going to ask you certain different requests, and you got to say no to a lot of them, and make excuses about why your request cannot be carried out. So when you say no, of course, on the other side, on the other party, those who are following you will say, okay, why you're not granting our request? So you got to have some certain excuse or reason to say, okay, it's because of this, because of that, you know. So you need to have a certain good answer for that question. Try to persuade the agent to withdraw or change the request. Sometimes you got to persuade or withdraw so that the person who has asked you to do something, they change the request themselves. Then ask higher authorities to overrule the agent's request. So these are most also the resistance that you get as your followers. So sometimes you, as the leader, you choose or decide on some, and you will get resistance from your followers. So that is also regarding that. So sometimes the followers, they try to persuade you, or sometimes they ask higher authorities to overrule the agent's request. Sometimes they ask higher authorities to overrule your request, or delay acting in hope that the agent will forget about the request. Sometimes they delay. So this is like both ways. Even the leader can do that. Delay is one of the ways that you just delay, and when you delay, the follower will forget about the request. Or when you, as a leader with the authority, ask your followers to do something, your followers might delay until you forget or you change, or make pretense of complying but try to sabotage the task. Sometimes you show that you are following, but the reality of the fact is that you are not necessarily doing it. So this is like both ways. So the resistance is actually both ways. Okay, so what are the influence processes? So first of all is instrumental compliance. So the target person carries out a requested action for the purpose of obtaining a reward or avoiding punishment. So one of the ways of compliance, one of the ways of complying with what you were asked is basically, okay, the sound is not clear. I hope it's better now. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Loud and clear. Can you just verify if you can hear me or not? Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Verify. Yeah, okay. So yeah, once again, if you have problems with the voice, sometimes it's just because of your internet is not fully connected, or the speed might be low because your friends don't have a problem with the voice, so probably it's your system or your internet connection. Okay, thank you. So we move on. So basically, the target person will try to follow your order or what you ask of them, just in order to get the reward or avoid the punishment. Because many times when you set a goal or you request something from your followers, you will set certain rewards for those who follow you, and then certain punishments for those who fail to do so. So both of them work in your favor. So when you put the reward, people like to get the reward, so that sort of encourages them to follow and get done what you ask them to. But at the same time, sometimes just it doesn't work by itself. So you got to set some punishments for those who are not encouraged enough to take the action, and they need something extra to push them towards the task. So that could be punishment. So if you punish them, those who don't, they'll be excluded from these benefits, or they'll not be able to attend the next session or whatever. So these are certain ways to punish them, those who are not complying. Then internalization. So by internalization is the target person becomes committed to supporting and implementing the agent's proposal because they appear to be intrinsically desirable and correct. So when you are asked to do something, you also need to internalize it. You need to put it in your mind and your heart and say, okay, this is the right thing to do, and then I'm going to commit to that, and I'm going to do it, and you implement it in your actions. So when you are asked to do a certain task, if you internalize that task, you really believe inside of you that this is something you want to do, then you're internalizing it, and you're basically committing or promising yourself that you got to support that proposal and get it done, because it's something desirable to you, it's something correct. So it's sort of a confirmation that you give yourself, say, okay, this is something that I was asked to, and I think it's correct and it's right, and I'm going to stick to it and do it. So I'm going to internalize it, put it in my mind, and do it. So that is something you need to do when you are required to do a task. So personal identification is the target person imitates the agent's behavior, adopts the same attitudes to please the agent. So at the same time, when you are the leader, your followers might just imitate certain actions that you do. That might be because imitation is the first step for innovation, coming up with new ideas. First, you got to copy exactly what the leader is saying or doing, so that you will become like the leader. So that is also very important. And then this question rises: why are we learning all these processes? Can somebody answer this question? Why do you think it's important to know these processes that happens in your employees or followers when you're a leader? Why do we care to know these? What is the benefit of knowing them? So that is a question if anybody can answer. You can just type it down or raise your hand and speak up. Okay? Any comments? Anybody wants to answer the question, please? Oh, look at the process thing. It's okay. Okay, yeah, very good. Yeah, we want to effectively lead. But how does it help us? I mean, I mean, in what respect do we need to know about the compliance, whether they are internalized or not, whether they personally identified us and they try to copy or imitate us as a leader? I mean, what's the benefit of knowing that? Yeah, very good, yeah. So, different situation requires different approaches. Okay, yeah, good. hmm Yeah, and at the same time, we need to understand that as a person who is leading, you always need confirmation. You want to know that you are on the right page. You want to know that you're doing it correctly. So one of the ways that you make sure you're doing it correctly is to get feedback, right? So not all the time your employees or your followers will come and say, hey, your leadership is great or bad. So what you need to see is the symptoms of their behaviors, and from them you can understand whether you're doing it right or not. So if these are not happening, it means that your power or your authority or the way you are you're leading or using your power is not necessarily efficient or is not efficiently utilized. So these are for you to make sure that you're on the right track. You want to know that, okay, your followers are complying with you. They, whenever you come up with the action or reward and punishment, they take it, they internalize it, they promise themselves they're going to do it, they accept it, they have faith and believe in you, and finally they personally identify themselves with you. So they really take you as a leader, they try to follow you, imitate you, copy you, to get done what needs to get done or what you request of them. So this is really a confirmation and a feedback process, because if you know what exactly it takes to really understand what is asked of them, and as a follower, what really needs to be done in their mind, or the processes or steps for them to be on the right track. You can just see, okay, which step is missing for each employee. Each employee is not necessarily at the right step, and you can walk them through it. You can just say, okay, now is the time to implement it. Now is the time to internalize it. And directly or indirectly, you can coach them to come back on to the right step. Okay. Yep, that's correct. Mr. Nazari, I will copy and paste your answer to everyone because you just sent it to me. So to perform our job and responsibilities more efficiently and effectively and solve the problem or guide our people correctly. That is correct. That is really correct. Okay, that is good. So what are the power types and sources? So French and Raven power taxonomy. Uh, so one of the power types is called reward power. Is the target person complies in order to obtain a reward controlled by the agent. So you as a leader, you have the reward. So the person will try to comply so that they will get the reward. So the reward is actually the real matter or the real concern for your followers. They want to make sure that those rewards that you are controlling or you possess and you're going to give out as a reward, they can get it, and they will follow whatever instructions you give them or whatever procedure they need to follow to get that certain reward that you are going to give them. Then coercive power is the target person complying in order to avoid punishment controlled by the agent. So sometimes you have that punishment, you'll coerce in case they don't comply. So they want to make sure they stay away from punishment and they do whatever it takes so that they will not be punished. So these are different behaviors we call them towards to or away from when it comes to leadership. And then legitimate power. So the target person complies because he or she believes the target has the right to make a request, and then the person has basically the obligation to comply. So it also has something to do with the legitimacy of your power. So if your employees, your followers, those who are following your lead, believe in you and feel that you have basically the legitimacy or the authority to ask them to do something, that helps them to do it and commit to it. And that sort of belief in you helps the process to be done and accomplished. Because a lot of time, if somebody doesn't believe in the leader's authority or legitimacy, they will not follow. If they think you are the person who has the right to ask them to do something, they will follow. If they don't, it's really not that feasible, but they will follow your lead or comply with what you really ask them to do. And then expert power. The target person complies because he believes the target has a special knowledge about the best way to do something. That is also very important because they need to believe in you. They need to think that you have the best interests of them and you have the right knowledge to know what is best or what is not. And what you say is basically the solution to their problem. So if they believe in your knowledge, so they think of you as an expert, that is when they will follow what you say and they comply with that. So if you really think that the person who's leading is the one who is knowledgeable about the task or what is at hand, the chances that you will follow what he says is much higher. The referent power is the target person complies because he admires or identifies with the agent and wants to get the agent's approval. So a lot of times, the leader has some referent power. You want to get their approval. You want to get their referrals later. So the fact that they'll be happy with you is basically one of the reasons that you want to make sure that you comply with what they expect you to. Okay, I'm receiving another message from Ms. Masuda that there's no voice. Everybody can hear me, right? Okay, I'm going to write for her. Easier. Okay. Okay, good. So, any questions so far? Any comments about the types and sources of power? Okay, Mr. Vafa, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Puran, very much. We actually learned good things about conception of power, influence of power, and type of resistance. I hope my question is not very much unrelated, but I wonder if we can use compromise in leadership. Sometimes we need to compromise, or can we actually compromise? Use compromise as an act of leadership. We don't want to resist, We don't want to exercise our power because we know that it will not yield good results. And I mean, when I say compromise, I mean compromise with followers, with your employees, not actually other leaders and peers.
Very good question. Sure, absolutely. Basically, as we discussed, those the last few slides you were showing how either the leader or the follower has to use them. One of them was the compromise, and absolutely, as a leader, I mean, sometimes not exercising their power is leadership. So not all the times you need to do something. Sometimes you need to do nothing, and that is the best action. So doing nothing could be the right action in certain situation. So absolutely, if as a leader you think when you compromise in that certain situation, you'll yield a better result. So you can absolutely go ahead and just do that. And if you think that is gonna be beneficial to what you want to do or what you want to get done, you can absolutely do that. So it's not about exactly just always commanding or asking people to do certain stuff and then we call it leadership. Sometimes you need to compromise, and that is true. So if you think is compromising is what you need to do and what is the one which gives you the result, you can absolutely do that. So it's all about your call. It's all your call, and it's all about doing the right thing. So if doing the right thing is doing nothing, in that case, you can absolutely do that. Okay, I hope that answered your question. Okay, great. So I get this question that reward power and communication power is the same. Not necessarily, Communication power is the way it's being able to communicate what you think or what you want to communicate with your followers. So not necessarily you want to communicate rewards. Sometimes you want to communicate certain command or certain task, and there's no reward or punishment yet because you're just introducing the task. So communication is basically the key or the foundation. You need to be able to communicate with your followers or employees so that they can do what you ask them to do. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, thank you for the confirmation about the voice. Okay, different types of power. So when it comes to power, we have different types of power. Sometimes your position will entitle you to certain powers, or sometimes you have, as a person, some certain powers. So your position could be your legitimate power. Because of your position, you're legitimized to get some power, or you'll just be granted some power over your employees. Sometimes you have the reward power. So because of the reward that you're giving, it actually gives you certain power. So is due to the reward. Or coercive power, which means that you sort of punish them unless they do certain things. So that sort of gives you a power source. And then information power. Sometimes just having information gives you power. Or ecological power is sometimes the ecology or the certain environment will give you the power. So it's also, so sometimes it's just your position that grants you the power. So it could be, the ecological power is basically the environment or the relationship or patterns of relationships between organizations or organisms. So the ecology or the environment of the company or the certain relationship has put you in a certain place that altogether and all in all will give you or grant you certain power. So because of all that, like your environment and your position and all that, you will get some certain power. So the ecology or the environment is the source of your power sometimes. No problem. So, and also sometimes your personal situation will give you the power. So because of the referent power, because people or your employees want to get your confirmation or your referral for the future, you are granted some power because they want to get your basically satisfaction or your confirmation of what they're doing. That sort of role play as your power source. Or sometimes you're an expert, and because of being an expert, it already gives you a certain level of power. Because being an expert, you'll be able to comment in you, or people will respect your comments and will follow your expertise. So certain times, just what you are, your personality or your attributes will be the source of your power. So these are different types of power, either personal or just a position. So when it's position, it's just a position. If you lose that position, you'll lose the power. But when it's personal, it's just because of you. So no matter what position you have, you'll have these powers. That's why you see sometimes an employee has these powers, and these powers for an employee could be over even their boss. So a certain employee might have a certain level of expertise that the boss will sort of come to the employee to use those powers. Okay, we have a very nice comment from Mr. Zagon that the research shows that there's an extremely correlated, like if the leaders conceive of themselves as powerful at work and if their level is higher, they would feel more powerful. Yep, very good. Thank you for that. Okay. Yeah, research, we will absolutely have the topic research methods as one of our courses, which is part of our MBA program. We want to make sure that we know what is involved in doing your research, and one of the facts that is important when it comes to research is to make sure that your research is generalizable. So it is important to understand that your sample, the people who did the research or were participating in the research, were representatives of what you're generalizing. So if it's only done in a certain region, it might just reflect the attributes of those certain group of people. So it needs to be a group that is representative, and it has all these different attributes. Very good point. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Guidelines for using legitimate authority. So these are some guidelines or some tools or suggestions for you when you are using your authority, plus the fact that it is a legitimate. So if you're using your legitimate authority, these are some guidelines could be helpful for you. So first of all, when you make a request from your employees or your followers, make sure you make polite and clear requests. So there's sometimes this misconception that when you are powerful or when you have the power over your employees, you can be impolite to them, which is not true. It has nothing to do with being polite or impolite. Your authority just gives you certain legitimacy to ask them to do certain things, but you still need to respect them. So the respect stays the same. You gotta respect them, and that is something that bring you the better results. So some leaders mistake the fact that because they're powerful, they can be rude or they can ask whatever they want in any certain behavior, which is not true. You absolutely need to respect your employees, and whatever you request should be in a respectful and clear way. So you got to make sure your request is absolutely clear so they understand exactly what you want. Because if it's ambiguous and it's not clear what exactly you want, they might take it as something else and they get it done, but it's not what you really want them to do. So you got to make sure they really understand exactly what you want them, and it's got to be asked in a very polite way. And also, it helps if you can explain to them what are the reasons behind asking what you want them to do. So if you're asking your employees to do certain things and they know why you're asking them, that will help the employees or the followers to understand the reason behind it, and that helps them to to make it internalized. Like if you remember, we were talking about internalizing what you're asked and if they want a copy and all that. So just knowing the reason behind it will help them to internalize it. It will help them to basically have faith in you and your authority or expertise, because they know that is something helpful or beneficial. So if they believe in that, that will expedite the process and help them to get done what needs to be done. Then do not exceed your scope of authority. So that is also very important. Don't push the barriers. There are certain limitations for you. Don't go beyond those limitations or borderlines. You cannot, it is not okay when you have certain authorities to suppose that you have other authorities which you don't have. Don't exercise those authorities that you don't have. That is really, really important. A lot of cases, leaders or managers or bosses, they think they own their employees. So they meddle in their private life, they meddle in other stuff that they are not supposed to do. You are not supposed to surpass any certain authority that you don't have. You cannot exercise something you don't have. Mr. Wafai is bringing up a religious example, which we don't really want to get in there because it is true, yeah. It is exceeding their authority, but mostly we are talking about business environment. So let's say if your manager is asking you to do something personal for her or for him, it is not necessarily something the manager should do because of their authority. If they're asking you as a friend, that is different. But if they're asking you as your boss, it's totally not okay. So that is very important. And verify authority if necessary. Sometimes if you're not clear about your authorities or what you can do and what you cannot do, make sure you verify and you know what you can or what you cannot do. Then follow proper channels. So when you do follow proper channels, you want to exercise your authority through certain proper channels and follow up to verify compliance. And when you verify your authority, at the same time, you want to verify the compliance, like those, confirmation tools, like whether your employees or followers are complying with your request. That is also very important because you might have the authority and you ask or make a certain request, but if your employees are not complying, basically you will not get the result that you want. So you want to make sure when you verify your authority, at the same time, you follow up and verify the compliance of your employees. And then insist or be persistent and insist on the compliance. Any effective irreverence and effectiveness of power between male and female in leadership or age issues. That is actually a very interesting question from Mrs. Agud. You know, as I said, in next semester, we will dig deeper in research and what is actually the foundations of research, what is exactly the ideas of research, how we do research. A lot of these findings or what we are talking about is actually due to the research or studies that have been done, and it will answer these questions. So what you're asking is actually a very good research topic. You can take a certain sample and see if there is any correlation between all these and let's say, the leadership. So the effectiveness of the leadership. There could be some correlation, but the presumption that we have is that the age and the sex, like male or female, are not necessarily the issue. But it could be in different regions or locations with different people. It could be absolutely important. Like in certain parts of the world, just being a male will be a better symptom of a leader because of the cultural aspect. And in some cultures, being a female will give you a better authority as a leader. Or also age, like certain ages are considered like wiser in certain cultures. So these could be absolutely different in different cultures or different regions or locations. So there could be some correlation, but we cannot exactly say it's not a fact. It's all dependent on the certain sample or location that you're dealing with. So it's not that generalizable that we can say, okay, absolutely there is a relationship between the sex and the leadership, or there is a relationship between the age. There could be, and research is actually the best source, or relying on research. Oh, no problem. That's absolutely fine. We can have any sort of type of question. Okay, so it could be true. So guidelines for using reward power, continuing that. So offer the type of rewards that people desire. So when it comes to reward, when it comes to reward, basically your reward should be something that your employees or followers desire or like. You cannot just reward them for something that they don't really care. That is not called a reward, you know. So it's very important for you to give them the reward that they are looking for. So otherwise your reward is not, is not doing what it's supposed to do. It's not creating the excitement in your followers to get it. So for you to make sure you get the response, you got to make sure that your reward is something exciting. And then also keep that in mind, that your offer should be fair and ethical. You got to make sure that your offer is ethical. You cannot just offer anything which is not necessarily ethical, you know. And also you should be fair, because you cannot just give a reward unfair to certain employee. And you know, you got to make sure as a leader you're also very fair to your employees. Fairness, but you are being a judge, is also a concept of leadership. And then the criteria: do not promise more than what you can deliver. That is also a basic concept. Don't over-promise. Make sure whatever you promise you can deliver. So that is very important. And explain the criteria for giving rewards and keep it simple. So what are the criteria for your rewards? When you want to give out your rewards, you want to make sure it's simple and clear, and you know, what are the criteria they need to do or follow to be able to get your rewards. Got to be clear on that too. And provide rewards as promised if requirements are met. If the requirements are met, you absolutely need to give out the reward. You cannot just say, okay, now we are not giving the reward. When you promise, they follow what you said, and they meet the criteria, you got to grant them the reward. Okay. Then finally, use rewards symbolically, not a manipulative way. Okay. Then you need to keep that in mind, that you're not manipulating your employees to take them to a certain direction, because rewards should just be something as an encouragement, not just nothing else but encouragement for them to do certain things. And if they role play as something else, you need to think twice whether you are at the right track or not, because some people use rewards as certain ways to bribe their employees. So it is not true. And a very good thought from Mr. Zargun, that money is not necessarily the best reward, you know. I mean, extra money is absolutely important, but sometimes there are better rewards, better, even just a certificate, even just you know, a reward certificate, even just an acknowledgement, even a pat on the shoulder could be a good reward. Just acknowledging the fact that your team members, your followers, your employees are doing the task, and acknowledging that and thanking them for it sometimes is a good reward. It's something that they really care for. So recognizing and acknowledging is sometimes a good reward. And the question is, what can be a fair reward to be offered? It depends on the situation, but it's something that should be within your power. It's something that you can deliver, and it's something that when you want to give it out, you have certain criteria that you can make sure that you give it to the right person. Because if you're giving the reward and you say, okay, everybody can get it, and then certain people will not be able to, there is a problem there. You got to make sure that the reward is something that everybody can achieve it if they work hard. So you have a certain measurement tools so that you can measure their performance and be sure that you give the reward to the right person who deserves it. So you have the justice over there. So as long as you have all these, you're fine. And as we said, you want to make sure that you are giving that symbolically and you're not manipulated or you're not using your employees in a certain way that you're not supposed to. Okay. Can anybody help Ms. Masuda to set up her voice? Maybe you can tell her what are the best ways to do that. Okay, so following on guidelines, we're using coercive power. So now we're using your punishment power. So you need to explain the rules and requirements and ensure that people understand the serious consequences of all violations. So when you are going to punish your employees if they don't do certain things, you could absolutely use that, but you want to make sure that you explain to them what exactly are the consequences or the results of not following certain requirements, what happens in result. Then respond to infractions promptly and consistently without showing favoritism or to particular individuals. So when you're punishing, make sure that applies to everyone. So it's not okay if you as a leader will punish certain individuals and not the others, even though they both did the same violation. So you got to make sure that you're fair. So when you set certain violations or certain punishments, you got to make sure that you would punish anybody. You don't favor anyone and you don't disfavor anyone. Then investigate to get the facts before using the reprimands and punishments, and avoid jumping to conclusions and making hasty accusations. So when you are going to do punishment, you got to make sure you're making the decision on a very solid ground. It's not just you are making a judgment out of nothing. You got to make sure your judgment is fair and thorough and out of the facts that you have investigated, and you're sure that your decision is correct. So that is also very important. Then, except for most serious infractions, provide sufficient oral or written warnings before resorting to a punishment. So whenever you want to make a punishment, you got to make sure before that you give them warnings, you give them sort of oral or written verbal warnings so that they know what exactly is going wrong, and when you finally are going to punish them, they have already been notified. So you cannot say that, okay, we were not notified, we didn't know, and all that. Okay. And administer warnings and reprimands in private and avoid making rash threats. So it is also very important that when you are making punishments, don't do it in front of everyone and don't sort of make them lose faces. You want to do it professionally. So that is also part of the respect part. Make sure you respect your employees and you don't disrespect them in front of everyone. You can absolutely go ahead and punish them, but don't make them feel disrespected. And in guidelines for using coercive power, stay calm and avoid the appearance of hostility or personal rejection. You don't want to make it personal. Be always professional. Express a sincere desire to help the person and comply with role expectation and thereby avoid punishment. So, help the person to comply with those expectations so that they can avoid the punishment in the future. So, don't show that sincere desire that you want to help them and make sure it's not going to happen again. Then invite the person to suggest ways to correct the problem and seek agreement on a concrete plan. So when you're helping them, when you're coming up with a plan that helps them not to get where they are, you want to make sure that you get their feedback, their suggestion, how they see it, and make sure that you are on the right page and you get the agreement and confirmation that what you're suggesting is good for them, so that they can utilize it and apply it. Maintain credibility by administering punishment if non-compliance continues after threats and warning have been made. So, if you tell them that there is a punishment for certain thing, and they really don't follow those procedures and they violate, despite the fact that you told them and all that, make sure you exercise the punishment. Make sure that you administer the punishment so that you keep or maintain your authority or credibility, because people will not believe in you next time if you say you will do something and you don't. So despite the fact that you say, okay, make sure you're fair and all that, but if the follower or the employee deserves to be punished, make sure you do the punishment. Just don't say and don't do. It's not a good way. And a good point from Mrs. Argun, yes, empowering the employee, you want to make sure help them understand what they can do. Sure, absolutely, that's true. Then use punishments that are legitimate, fair, and commensurate with the seriousness of the fraction. And your punishment should be in line with the seriousness or the situation at hand. You cannot just create any punishment that is not necessarily relevant or compliant to the situation. And it should be fair, as we said. That is really important when you're punishing someone. You got to make sure that you are fair. So what are the ways to acquire and maintain referent power? So some of the ways are show acceptance and positive regard, act supportive and helpful, use sincere forms of ingratiation, and defend and back up people when appropriate, and do unsolicited favors. Then make self-sacrifices to show concern and keep promises. So the referent power is when, as we said, it's your personal power that you have is when your confirmation or satisfaction is important to the employees or followers, and so you want to make sure that you gain the right image. So when you self-sacrifice, you show that, excuse me, that certain image of yourself, your employees or followers will respect you. So when you keep your promises, when you support them, when you show that you're doing something in their favor and all that. So you have the positive regard and acceptance in your doings. All these will help or create grounds for your employees to see that certain referent power in you. And it is true what Mr. Zargun says. The power of punishment could be very useful. I mean, sometimes you absolutely need punishment. Without punishment, you cannot get a lot of things done. If there is no punishment, people will not stop doing certain stuff, because certain activities are rewarding in themselves. You know, sometimes an employee might cheat, and it will help them to meet their goals. So that is rewarding in itself for them, cheating in that sense. If there is no punishment to compensate for the reward that is involved in doing something illegal or unfair, then you will not stop them from doing stuff, because when there is no punishment, they'll keep on doing stuff. These, you know, actually, Mr. Rafa, these are pretty much correct, or I would say useful in any type of leadership. So certain ways that you exercise these powers will change the type of leadership that you have. Like in a dictatorship or telling kind of management or leadership, you will be using a lot of punishment and a lot of telling and how people should behave, and you will not necessarily follow a lot of these guidelines. And then, what are the ways to maintain expert power? You want to explain the reasons for a request or proposal and why it is important. Okay, so when you're an expert, you're supposed to know everything. You're supposed to know the answers. So giving them a good reason why something is important is really important, because it shows you are an expert, you know why it is important, and that sort of gives you that expert power, or enhances or enforces that power. Then provide evidence that a proposal will be successful. Okay, so you need to also provide evidence and facts that if they do it the way that you are suggesting, it will be successful. So that is also very important. Do not make rash or careless or inconsistent statements. When you are an expert, you don't make just statements out of nothing. You always are very evidence, very knowledgeable, and whatever you say should be based on a certain calculation or research, or it's relevant and reliable. Don't make unreliable statements, because that will hurt your expertise image. Do not lie or exaggerate or misrepresent the facts. Never lie or misrepresent the facts. Never manipulate. Sabaki says that our societal leaders have two abilities: lie and corrupt. It's really sad if it's the case, but there are a lot of leaders who are not like that. So we are actually, as leaders ourselves, we got to make sure we are honest, we are not manipulative. Listen seriously to the person's concern and suggestions. You want to make sure that you have sincerity and seriously you're listening to the concerns, and act confident and decisive in a crisis. And be confident and be decisive in a crisis or a challenge. All these are helpful when it comes to the expert power. So now we are going to talk about how power is gained or lost. So social exchange theory basically entails that power based on exchange of benefits or powers. So in social exchange theory, we are of the opinion that power is based on exchange of benefits or favors. So it is something acquired if control over scarce resources is possible, access to vital information is done, skill in dealing with critical problems, accumulative idiosyncratic credits or rule of the thumbs, and then innovative proposals. So all these will help us to acquire some power. So if we have control over some certain scarce or rare resources, if we have access to vital information, some key information, and if we have skills, if we are expert in dealing with certain problems or certain rules of thumbs or innovative proposals, all these will give us some certain power. And it is lost when pursuing selfish motives, innovation, if it leads to failure, how serious the failure is, and amount of status. So all these also can work against us and make us lose that power. So yeah, also don't overplay or overuse your power. That sort of makes you lose your power. So the strategic contingencies theory says that expertise in coping with important problems, certainty, centrality of the subunit within the workforce, and extent to which the subunit's expertise is unique and substitutable. So this is also very important in strategic contingency theory. So the level of expertise that you have in dealing with the problems and centrality of the subunits with the workforce, like those subunits need to be central and important. They shouldn't be overlapping. So every certain subunit has to have their centrality and importance, and extent to which the subunit expertise is unique rather than substitutable. So it should be unique and useful for that certain unit. So there are some certain consequences for position and personal power. Personal power positively correlated to satisfaction and performance. Position power non-significant or negative relationship with satisfaction and performance. All types of power can be effective in gaining limitations of power study. So as you can see, when you have personal power, it means that those powers are because of you, not because of your position. They are actually positively correlated with your performance. So if your knowledge or your abilities and all that is giving you the power, it actually works for you. But when it comes to a certain fact that your position is giving you that power, it mostly works against you, because people think that it's just because of your position that you have this power. So you got to be really careful in exercising it, because not everybody will like it. So how much power should leaders have? That is also a very common question. It depends on the what needs to be accomplished and the leader's skill in using that power. So the power that it takes to do certain activity determines how much power you need, and the skill that you have, and also the situation. Too much power may be dangerous as not enough power. So if you don't have enough power or authority while you're at a certain position, It could be dangerous. It could be causing a failure to the task or what you do or your group does. At the same time, when you have too much power, it's also very dangerous, because too much power, you will overplay, overrule everybody, and nobody can control you. So a lot of corruptions, a lot of failures in big corporations happen because of too much power for a certain person. Like the certain CEO of the company, like Enron, they were so powerful that they would do unethical stuff, and there were no one to stop them. That is actually happening in a lot of major big corporations. They overuse their power, and nobody stops them because nobody can. So influence tactics. There are certain general influence tactics. One is impression management. So intended to influence people to like the agent or to have a favorable evaluation. Then political tactics used to influence the organizational decisions or otherwise gain benefits for an individual or group. And proactive influence is it has an immediate task objective. And finally, reactive influence is used to resist an unwanted influence attempt or to modify the agent's request to be more acceptable. So these tactics are used to make the influence required. So the impression management tactics is intended to influence people to like the agent, to like the leader. Some political tactics is organizational decisions benefit certain individuals or groups. And proactive tactics, they have immediate task objectives. And finally, reactive influence is used to resist an unwanted influence. So these are some tactics that could be used. So these are certain research that were done to find out or identify proactive tactics. And the comparison is actually on this type of research that was done, the rationality, exchange, integration, ingratiation, assertiveness, coalition, upward appeal are the keys or the tactics. But on the other side, on those researchers, you see that rational, persuasion, exchange, ingratiation, and pressure, coalition, consultation, inspirational appeals, personal appeals, legitimating, or collaboration, and uprising, or the fact that are used as tactics to influence the followers. So these are some definitions for you. What do we mean by a rational persuasion, uprising, inspirational appeals, consultation, exchange, collaboration, personal appeal, ingratiation, and coalition. So the rational persuasion is the agent uses logical arguments. So logic is actually the key in this type of persuasion. In the uprising, the agent explains how carrying out a request or supporting a proposal will benefit the target. Then inspirational appeals, you inspire your employees to try to create excitement. Consultation, you give them consultation, you consult with them for improvement and proposals and ideas and suggestions. Then exchange is you offer an incentive or favors, or you exchange something, some benefit. Collaboration, you work together, use the resources in the system. Personal appeals is you try to carry out a request of support or something like as a friendship. Ingratiation is actually you use praise or flattery to build their character and give them confidence. Legitimating tactics is you try to establish the legitimacy of a request to verify authority. Pressure, you try to pressure them. And then finally, coalition tactics is you seek the aid of others to persuade them. So like as a group, you try to persuade them. So as you can see here, the power and influence behavior, the leader power has a certain relationship in the leader influence behavior and influence outcomes like the commitment, the compliance, and resistance. And also there is a relationship between the leader influence behavior on those results. So the leader power is in between and it's influencing their influence behavior and their results, and in the meantime those two are related to each other. So here are some summary of findings of proactive influence tactics that you can read about, and also ways to use the core tactics. So rational persuasion, we just talked about it. When you want to use the rational persuasion, you explain in detail what is requested, use the facts, provide evidence, explain why. Inspirational is more of motivating, describe the proposed change and excitement of it, and link the proposed activity to change. Describe a clear, appealing vision of that change and use a dramatic, expressive style. Consultation is you tell them your objectives, ask for suggestions, involve them, and respond in a positive way. And collaboration, offer to provide assistance and offer to help solve problems, help to implement, and finally show a person how to get the task done. Okay, I hope this is the last time I'm answering this question. I almost answer this question every single time in the class. The PowerPoint slides, they are not sharing it with you because we have the copyright issue. As a company that we follow the copyrights, we are not able to share these slides with the students. You get to see them in the class. We record the class. It's available to you via MyLMS. The slide itself is not supposed to be shared with the students. That is something that has been communicated with you by the admin. They are not supposed to do it. We are not supposed to do it. They'll be held liable if we do that. It's something against the law. So I hope that you understand that, and we cannot give you the slides. But what we are doing is we are using the slides. We record the class. These classes with my voiceover is always available for you. So it's basically you have the slides. It's not just you have the slides only, but you have the class as recorded. So you can absolutely go and re-listen to the class, re-watch the slides as many times as you want. But the only thing is we cannot give you the slides. So this has been communicated with you by admin, and I have been doing it, and so we cannot do it. It's not that we don't want to give you the slides. We are not permitted to do that. So I hope everybody understands that. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact admin. They'll explain it to you. And thank you so much for your understanding. Okay. Then these are some guidelines for
using the supplementary tactics, like explaining how the person could benefit from carrying out a requested task, explain how the task you want the person to do would help their career, explain how or why a proposed activity or change would be good for the person, explain how a proposed change would solve some of the problems. So giving them the reason, explaining it to them. Then when it comes to exchanging, offer something that person really wants, offer something specific, and promise to do something for the person in the future in return, or offer to provide an appropriate reward, something that they really desire. And for ingratiation is say that the person has a special skills or knowledge needed to carry out a request, or praise them, or show respect or appreciation. So give them some acknowledgement. And then finally explain that the request or proposal is consistent with their official rules and policies. Point out that your request is consistent with the prior management, or use a document to verify that a request is legitimate, and explain that a request or proposal is consistent with prior precedent and established practice. And personal appeal, ask a person to do you a favor as a friend, ask for their help, say that you are in difficult situation, or say you need the task as a favor. Then pressure them. You can sometimes use pressure as a tool, asking the person in a persistent way. You follow up asking them, continue asking them. And then repeatedly check if they have done it, and warn the person about the penalties if they don't do it. Coalition is mention the names of others who endorse a proposal. Get others to explain to the person why to support that activity. Bring someone along for support and meeting with the person to make a request or proposal, and getting others to explain to the person why. Okay, and finally, effectiveness of tactic combination. Sometimes it's not that one of these tactics are necessarily the answer to the problem. You always need to make a combination of it and use certain tactics together so that you get the results. Then reactive combinations. Sometimes you need to react to certain responses or behaviors. You use certain tactics in response. Ethical use of influence tactics. You always need to be ethical and use ethical use of those tactics. And limitations of research and proactive influence tactics. And there are always limitations to what we know. Is that there is no final answer, and all we know is actually the result of research and studies that have been done so far, and there's a lot to be explored again in the future. Okay, so that will conclude the session today. To answer the question about the assignments and everything, the last session, which is 2 sessions from now, I will explain exactly what you need to do. The previous semester, the group assignments were not really satisfactory. A lot of groups didn't submit, or they submitted too late. So I decided to change the format or the way we do things this semester. And I will explain to you at the last session how we are going to be evaluated. So I will explain it to you, and we will go from there. So far I haven't explained to you how the group assignments work, and but we will actually go through indeed how we should do it and what you need to do at the last session. Okay, yes please. What question do you have, Mr. Sansare? Please go ahead and ask your question. Oh, okay, yeah, as I explained, your assignments, I will tell you at the last session. I'll give you some time to get done, and I'll explain to you at the last session. Oh, no problem. Okay, so that will end the session today. Is there any other question, any comments? Uh, 30 minutes. I'll start the session right away. So I'll give you a small break, and you can join the class within next 10-15 minutes. So I'll just start the class, and when everybody's in the class, we will start. But it's like in 10-15 minutes. Okay. So thank you, and I'll see you in the next class.